wanted to discuss, or today's sort of webinar presentation is a discussion about the recent lawsuit filed by 8 Mile Style. So 8 Mile Style is the name of the publishing catalog, music publishing catalog for the early Eminem songs, like Lose Yourself, right? And the lawsuit was filed a couple of months ago against Spotify for copyright infringement. And what it was saying is Spotify took the songs written by Marshall and others and used them without a license. That's basically stealing someone else's stuff, and that's called infringement. And the lawsuit was filed at an interesting time. It was filed after the Music Modernization Act was passed into a law. And the Music Modernization Act has some language in it that says, hey, if you don't sue us by December 31st, 2017, then when this law goes into effect, you're kind of out of luck in your ability to pursue something called statutory damages, which are an amount of money that a court can award you, or a jury or a judge at its discretion, up to, in the worst case scenario for them, $150,000 for each infringement. So if you have 10 songs that you wrote and those 10 songs were infringed upon, it would be 10 times 150,000 is the maximum liability. So the law kind of said you can't do that anymore, except if the music services don't follow the new rules. So it was an interesting lawsuit because it came after the passage of the Music Modernization Act. It was filed after the passage of the NMPA, the National Music Publishing Association, Spotify settlement. It was filed after the class action lawsuit, which is a whole separate thing, where attorneys represented a class of people or entities, which are basically songwriters, people that write songs, saying you stole their stuff, Spotify without a license. And then that was settled. It came after 4 or 5 additional direct action lawsuits by a group of different music publishers that did not opt in to the NMPA Spotify settlement, removed themselves from the Spotify class action settlement, and then sued Spotify before December 31st, 2017, right? So it came after that. And then all those cases went on, and apparently from what I read in the news, many of those settled. And then came 8 Mile Style. So that was filed. And I don't want to call it another run-of-the-mill copyright infringement lawsuit because that's not doing it justice. It was a important lawsuit about one of the largest music streaming services in the world that went public, that has a market cap on the stock market north of $40 billion, that raised $2.5 billion in investment capital, another $500 million in debt, and launched its music service basically off the value of the music, right? Spotify without music has literally no value. People use Spotify to gain access to the music. So the value of Spotify is predicated off of the music that's in it. The wine bottle somehow became worth more than the wine, right? Spotify is the wine bottle, the music is the wine. And this lawsuit was filed going, you guys have made, tremendous amounts of money. You went into the stock market. All the original investors made billions and billions of dollars. Now I sound like Carl Sagan. And you did so without even bothering to get a license to this stuff, without making payments, because you can't make a payment if there's no license. What the F? We're suing you for infringement. And to make it all worse, you didn't even follow the rules, the new rules that were made after the Music Modernization Act came into effect, which if you just followed those rules, we couldn't really even be pursuing you for these sorts of damages. And that was the lawsuit. Now, very quickly, it is possible, because I invited him, the plaintiff counsel that filed this lawsuit is a man named Richard Bush. Richard Bush is a senior partner at the law firm called King & Ballow. He represented the Marvin Gaye estate in the lawsuit against Robin Thicke. He represented Eminem going back sometime in Universal. He represented a number of the plaintiffs in these direct action lawsuits with Spotify. He's sort of a hit list of triumph in the music industry, a very, very intelligent man. And he indicated he might be joining us today. And if he does, when he shows up, if he shows up is a better way of putting it, I'm going to stop talking about what I'm talking about, turn it all over to him, and let him point blank tell you about the lawsuit. You'll hear it straight from the, I don't want to say horse's mouth, but you'll hear it straight from him. I'm actually going to turn up the volume on my computer in the event he shows up so I know he's there. So 1 second. So that was the lay of the land. You know, about 2 weeks ago, or a week and a half ago, the plaintiff counsel, Richard Bush, on behalf of Eminem, 8 Mile Style Publishing, filed what's called an amended complaint. So that means they took the original complaint, the lawsuit, and they amended it. They added additional things to it. What they added to it was, you know, Spotify, and this is layman's terms, okay? I'm not an attorney. It wasn't just you that did this infringement, just stole this music, used it without a license. You actually had somebody help you. You had an organization called the Harry Fox Agency. Sometimes you know it as HFA. They worked with you. This is what it says in the complaint. This is what it alleges, okay? It doesn't mean it has happened. It's what's alleged. The Harry Fox Agency worked with you to try to trick us and other music publishers, but us specifically, into thinking Spotify had a license when it didn't. So they contributed towards this infringement, contributory infringement. And in addition, they colluded with you, Spotify, to commit fraud by creating royalty statements and sending them out for musical compositions, these songs that weren't licensed. You can't have a royalty statement if there's no license, right? Because a license dictates the terms. It dictates the royalty rate. How much do you get paid? If someone just takes your stuff and you don't agree with them over what you're getting paid, how could they issue a royalty statement? It's like I start a website, jeffsmovies.com. I take now the Disney-owned Star Wars films, but only the original ones, because the new ones just suck. I'm sorry, man. I was just watching a little bit of the last one last night because I got Disney Plus to watch Hamilton, Return of the Jedi, or I'm a Jedi, or whatever the hell it's called. It was so bad. Anyway, go to the original Star Wars, jeffsmovie.com. And I can't just put it up there, charge people money, and then just remit a royalty to Disney. I didn't get their permission. We didn't agree on anything. So the complaint alleges that Spotify contributed towards the infringement to make it look like things were licensed when they weren't through something called a notice of intent process, which I'll describe more shortly. And in addition, created fraudulent royalty statements for things, songs, it knew were not licensed. You can't create a royalty statement for something unlicensed. So if you send someone a royalty statement, what you're doing potentially is tricking them into thinking they're licensed when they're not. So contributory infringement, in addition to colluding with Spotify to trick music publishers into thinking they were licensed when they were not. And that is the amended complaint that was filed, and that's what it alleges. Right? This hasn't gone to court yet. It's what it alleges, and we haven't seen the response yet. So that is the basis for this webinar, because it touches on so many different things, from what is a music publisher to what is a song, how does Spotify get a license, what is a compulsory license, what is the Harry Fox Agency, and it domino effects from there, because if these things being alleged in the complaint are true, and that's an if, but if they're true, dear God, what that means. Because the National Music Publishing Association, NMPA, okay, that is a trade organization, like the Recording Industry Association of America, the RIAA. So you know what, I'm actually gonna make use of the whiteboard for a second. Why not? NMPA, because sometimes I'll say it and people go, "What is?" I don't know if it's back. Is that backwards to you guys? Because it's backwards on my screen. It's kind of funny. Here, hit me up, put me a message. Tell me if that's front or back. Boy, I hope that's front way. Looks normal here. Okay, great. Thank you. Cool. Okay, so the NMPA, that's what it is, National Music Publishing Association. Now, this is a trade organization. It is not a governmental entity. It is an organization that was created to represent the interests of its members. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. Just like the Recording Industry Association of America was created to represent the interests of its members. And the members pay dues, they meet the requirements, and they pay dues and become members of the organization. The NMPA works, or professes to work, on its website to the betterment of music publishers, which I'll explain. It does have some language on its website which leaves me confused. It says it represents and works for all music publishers and songwriters in the United States, which I don't understand. If you're not a member, how are they working for you? Particularly if they enter into settlements or lawsuits where only its members get to benefit. So it seems odd that they would say that, but I guess one could argue if they do something to get royalty rates increased, and it does benefit everybody, right? It's a decent organization. But what's weird is the NMPA owned 100% of the Harry Fox Agency from basically 1927 until 2015. The NMPA owned it. It was 100% owned by the NMPA. And the NMPA is funded by its members. The three biggest members that pay the highest dues are Universal, Warner, and Sony, who are also board members of the organization with other music publishers. And all the music publishers that are members of it pay dues, and it has a board of directors. So it's kind of strange if the allegations in the lawsuit are correct, if the Harry Fox Agency contributed to the infringement of copyright and colluded with Spotify to commit fraud, it did so while owned by the trade organization whose job it is to represent and protect music publishers. Just saying, that's weird. Now, these are allegations. They haven't been made true or not, but it's just if they do become true, or if the specifics in the complaint are substantiated, and some of them are pretty damning, you got to wonder, how does this all together? How could the NMPA own an entity that worked against the goals of its own members? And I'm not saying it did or it didn't. I'm just saying, that's kind of how it could appear. So that got me thinking, that's part of this as well. And then that moves into some other weird tangents, because you get in sort of a domino effect. If the allegations are true, then the NMPA owned Harry Fox. Harry Fox was tricking music publishers, potentially including the NMPA's own members, into thinking they were licensed when they weren't, while at the same time, the National Music Publishing Association was lobbying its own members to sign a document called the NMPA Spotify Settlement, which had its own members waive their rights to pursue copyright infringement, statutory damage liability against Spotify. In other words, hey, we're the NMPA, sign this document, and you'll waive your rights to pursue statutory damages financial reward, or financial judgments or judgments from Spotify. We're going to shield it from being sued, while we have our other company working to trick all of you to think you're licensed when you're not. While, and here's the other piece that gets really weird and what this is all about, while Universal, Warner, and Sony, who are our three biggest dues paying members, right, because they need to fund the organization, sit on our board of directors and are partial owners in Spotify. Because now you have three owners of Spotify. I think they own anywhere between 8 to 14% of the company in stock before it went public, sitting on the board of the NMPA, who use their own company to help, according to the complaint, this is the allegations, to help Spotify infringe on copyright against their own members and collude with them to commit fraud through these fake royalty statements, getting people to waive their rights to sue Spotify for damages. Why? Because if Spotify could get public, if they could protect it, and Spotify went public, these three partial owners, Universal, Warner, and Sony, stood to make billions of dollars. And Spotify did go public, and Universal, Warner, and Sony did make billions of dollars. I'm just pointing out some dots. Doesn't mean that's how they connect. But again, this is only if the allegations are true, and then it sort of spills into this domino effect. So that got me all thinking, I might want to explain all of this. And that might explain one of my tweets about getting pressured to not discuss this. And I'll leave that there, not to be cryptic, but the amount of behind the scenes politics and threats and so forth it's really frustrating. I don't mean to turn this to a platform for myself. I mean, this is very simple. I just believe music has value. If somebody wants to use it, that's totally fine. Get a license, make the appropriate royalty payment, and then the entity that earned that money should get paid that money. That's my radical statement in the music industry, and it ruffles feathers, and it's frustrating. Okay, so that is sort of the background to all of this and why I'm here. And I'm gonna do, and I apologize for ducking off screen. I see there's a lot of comments and some questions. I'm gonna do a quick peek before I sort of get into the foundation of all of this and move on to explain this in more detail. So just pretend Girl from Ipanema is playing. Let's see, okay, so there's a couple things here. Please publish the filing or the link. Okay, that came from James Jackson. I will do that. RW says, what I've read, the music modernization is supposed to benefit songwriters, producers, and engineers, but as you mentioned, it hurt them instead. Can you explain where the harms are? Thank you. Yeah, so I'll get to all of that. Eli says, you can hear me, Jeff. Do you think, I don't think it's his lawsuit. No, it is not my lawsuit. It's not Jeff's lawsuit. I can't trust Trump. Okay. Okay, so let me go back. I'll get to all that. So that is the foundation. What I want to do is I will at some point go into the Zoom chat here, and I will go to the instant messaging section, and I'm going to provide a couple of links. One link is going to be for the definitive guide to Spotify royalties. So this is a document I wrote. It runs about, I don't know, 70 pages, 69 pages, and it has like, or 45 pages and like 69 diagrams. And it explains how royalties are calculated in this sort of streaming world with what we call interactive services. The relevance of this is on page 11 of this document. I discuss what a music publisher is, what a songwriter is, what a self-publisher songwriter is, what a publishing administration deal is, and it's vital to understand these components. So otherwise, a lot of this won't make sense. So for those of you that are joining today that already know this, forgive me for telling you things you know. And for those of you that don't, I'm going to sort of cater to you very quickly, but I'm not going to go in deep into it because I'm going to refer you to the definitive guide to Spotify royalties, which if you go through my Twitter feed, you'll find links to it all over the place. And I will post it back up here at some point. I don't want to just walk off screen now and go find the link and post it. I feel that would be kind of rude. So first thing you need to know, okay, let's start with a very simple basic. In each piece of recorded music, there are 2 copyrights. And again, I'm not going to dwell on this too long. Hang on, let me just move this thing out of the way so I can see better. Again, if you go to my YouTube channel, you will find a 2.5-hour presentation called Untangling the Mess. And it also explains all of this in great detail. So between the definitive guide to Spotify royalties and Untangling the Mess, a 2.5-hour presentation, it will really delve into the stuff I'm about to touch on. But I want to get to the other stuff, so I'm going to do this rather quickly. So in each piece of recorded music, right? Okay, this is a CD, which looks like a donut. And I'm assuming you guys can see that. If not, I can move things closer or farther. You know what, let me just nudge this a little closer. Sorry about the reflection. All right, do that. And I will try to move this a little bit closer here. And I got to prop it up, bear with me. I'm at somebody else's house and I'm borrowing their stuff. There we go. All right. Sorry about the reflection. All right, so there's your donut. Sorry. Let's make this the, I always use this as the example. I will always love you. All right. I will always love you. So that is the name of the song, and it is the name of the recording. Arista Records, okay, hired Whitney Houston to sing that song. Arista Records owns the copyright to the song. And that's a P with a circle around it. If you can't see that, it's a P with a circle. I'll make it bigger. Don't worry. I'll get better at this. The P stands for phonogram. So that's one of the two copyrights is a P for phonogram, and that is for the recording of the song. The recording is owned by Arista. Arista hired or did a deal with Whitney Houston to sing it. Whitney Houston, okay? So the recording is owned by Arista. However, as all of you are probably aware, or anyone that knows me, because you've heard me say this 100,000 times, Dolly Parton, this is Dolly, she wrote the lyric and the melody. That is called the musical composition. That is represented by a C with a circle, and that is your second copyright. So in each piece of recorded music, you have one copyright for the P, the recording, and a second separate copyright for the lyric and the melody. That's called a musical composition. Just to dwell on that for half a second longer, then I'll move on. Do that. There we go. Okay. Think about this. You've written a song, it's in your head. It's ephemeral. It doesn't exist. It's not tangible. It only becomes tangible when you either write it down or you record it. So when you write it down or record it, it gets that copyright. If you're not writing it down and not recording it and it's just in your head, there's no copyright. Okay? And these are two different things. A recording, that's not in your head. A recording exists on a fixed, tangible medium, a piece of vinyl, a CD, a cassette, 8-track, right? But the lyric and melody, it's in your head until it gets recorded or written down. And that's what makes musical compositions confusing, is they don't exist, they're intangible. They only exist when they get put to a fixed medium like sheet notes or notation. God, I'm losing my mind, I'm getting old. It gets sold as sheet music. There we go. Sheet music, or there's a recording. Right? Then it's fixed, then it's tangible. So a recording cannot exist without a composition. But a composition, oh, it can exist without a recording, either a sheet music or because it's in your head. And that's the important point to know here. So that is the basic. If you want more on that, Definitive Guide to Spotify Royalties, or go to my YouTube channel. I can put the link to the 2.5, 3-hour thing I did called Untangling the Mess. So that's the basic foundation you need to know. All right, the next thing you need to know, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about the musical composition. That's the letter C. Okay, the letter C. I'm not going to talk about the letter P, the recording. I'm only going to talk about the C. Let's talk about the musical composition and how does Spotify or any streaming music service get the license, the permission to use either the recording or the lyric and melody. Okay, so you know what, I'm going to make the phonogram, the P line copyright here. It'll help me out. Okay, there's your P. So here's the music service. I'm just going to put MS for music service. And it wants to put a recording into its music service. It wants to do that. It needs two distinct and separate licenses. One license is for the sound recording. The second separate license is for the lyric and melody. These are two separate and distinct things with two separate licenses, two separate royalty rates, two separate ways they work, with the money being paid and calculated in two distinct and separate ways. Just because you get a license to the recording does not mean you have a license to the lyric and melody. And just because you have a license to the lyric and melody does not mean you have a license to the recording. You have to go and get the two separate, distinct licenses, because remember, the two separate and distinct things. Arista Records and Whitney Houston are over here. Dolly Parton's over here. Let's use another example. Bob Dylan wrote All Along the Watchtower. Bob Dylan is over here. Jimi Hendrix performed it over here. His record label owns it. Two distinct and separate things from two different entities. They need two licenses, two royalty payments, two pipelines of payments, separate royalty calculations for these two separate components. Now, these two separate components are connected, right? One can't exist in this scenario without the other. If you're going to stream the recording by default has a lyric and or melody. But this is the important point, right? So How do they get these licenses? Again, definitive guide to Spotify royalties. I'll put up the link. It goes through this in excruciating detail. But the short version is the music service calls the record labels, calls the entity that owns or represents the C, the sound recording, sorry, the P. It calls that owns the P. And they get a piece of paper, a contract. They negotiate the contract. They negotiate the terms. They negotiate the royalty rates. And that is the contract that is used. I'm going to use your stuff in my service. Here's how I'm going to use it. Here's the time frame I'm going to use it for. Here's how much money I'm going to pay you. Here's how I'm going to calculate this. These are your remedies if I don't do what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah. That's for the sound recording. The composition, the lyric and melody, is very different. The composition, the lyric and melody, is regulated by the United States government. The sound recording is not in this case. In other cases it is, but in this case it's not. The lyric and melody, the musical composition is. The government has regulations. It's weird, man. So unlike the record label that can negotiate different rates, different terms, it's really hard to do that with the lyric and melody because the government says these are the rules. So if you want to do different rules, a higher royalty as an example, kind of hard to do because how are you going to negotiate that? They can just say, well, screw you. I'm just going to do what the government says. I don't want to pay you more. So this license here, one where the government regulates it, is called a compulsory license. And it's called a compulsory license because you are compelled to have to give them a license for the lyric, for the C, for the lyric and melody, whether you want to or not. Metaphorically, the government walks into your home, puts a gun to your head as a songwriter, and this is metaphorically, of course, and says, I don't care if you don't want to give neonazi.com streaming music a license, you have to tough. And in addition, we're going to dictate how much money you get paid. The amount of money you get paid is called the statutory rate. Compulsory license, statutory rate. And again, the definitive guide to Spotify royalties goes through this in excruciating detail, but that's it. So let's move into how does the music service get that license under the regulations of the United States government. Sometimes you hear these terms thrown around, Section 114, Section 115. These are sections of the regulations of the law, of copyright law. And you can find them online. And this is what got modified somewhat with the Music Modernization Act, parts of it. But the regulations requirements say this. You're a music service. You get a recording, I Will Always Love You, Arista Records. You have a license for it. Before you can stream that recording, you need the second separate license for the lyric and melody. How do you get that license? Well, you've got three options, really. Option number one, do a direct license. You pick up the phone, you call Dolly Parton, and you negotiate a license back and forth. Now, you think about this, that's really burdensome for the music service. Because in some cases, you could have 24, 35 people writing one song, right? One song. If you look at hip hop in particular, songs that sample, there are multiple writers. Look at the Beatles, Lennon and McCartney, there's two. You go to other bands, think of your own band if you're in one. You all contribute towards it. Each one of you theoretically own a piece of that song. And each one of you can do different deals. So it can get very complex very quickly, and it makes it very difficult for the music service to sometimes get licensing. There's things called 100% licensing. I'm not going to get into that. So for those of you in the know, I know too, just let me table that. But you got to think that unlike record labels, where record labels aggregate a whole bunch of recording artists and recordings, right? Sony Records probably has millions of recordings underneath them. When it comes to the musical composition, there's 30, 40 million songwriters minimum around the world. And most of them are not aggregated. Like record labels aggregate recordings, there are entities that work for these songwriters. They're called publishing administrators. But the majority of the world's publishing songwriters, are not in these deals. They don't even know it. They don't even know what they don't know, and it's not their fault. So for the music service to get these direct licenses, they literally would have to call up, millions of people, get these deals done. That's a real pain in the ass. So they could do that though if they wanted to. The second way they could get a license is, that's a horrible number too, is using the compulsory. Okay, so the compulsory license is the regulations that the government has set out. And let's start where they know who wrote the song. And they know who represents the rights to the song. In that case, according to the government, they can get a license if they follow the rules. And the rules state, currently they state, that the music service that wants to use the musical composition has 30 days from first distribution of the composition. Now remember, the composition is part of the recording. So when you say distribution, you're probably thinking there's a recording there, you're right. So, and this harkens back to when there were record labels that would distribute physical things like CDs and vinyl. When you move into interactive streaming like Spotify, the word distribution gets a little wonky. What does it mean? What does 30 days from first distribution mean? I've never gotten a clear answer. Does 30 days from distribution mean from the date it went live in the music service? Does it mean from the date it first streamed in the music service after it went live? I don't know, but it's 30 days. So if the music service sends a notice to, let's make it Dolly Parton, within 30 days of first distribution that says, I intend, let's make it Spotify, I Spotify intend on using this recording of your song in my service, and provide some information about that recording, then they have a license. But they have to send that notice. And that notice is called a notice of intent, NOI. The NOI, the notice of intent, I intend on using this recording in my service. Within 30 days of first distribution, it is sent to Dolly Parton or the entity that works for Dolly Parton representing the rights. Then you get a license. If you don't get a license. Okay? The entity that receives it, either Dolly Parton or the company that works for it, they don't have to sign anything for it to be valid. The fact that it is sent to them and received by them causes the license. So it's a pretty low bar, right? Now move to a third way you get a license. And by the way, if you're licensed under the compulsory, then the rest of the regulations kick in, including how much you get paid. The third way is also part of the compulsory license. Let's say I record a song right now called Greasy Window, okay? And I record it, and I go to DistroKid, and I upload it, and they distribute it to Spotify. What you might not know is maybe my great-great-grandmother, now let's make it my mom. Maybe my mother wrote that song, and she sang it to me when I was 2 years old. Or maybe my mom did that. I record the song, it goes to DistroKid. DistroKid passes it on to Spotify. DistroKid is only telling Spotify the name of me as the DIY artist. I'm not part of a label, I am my own label. You know, the Jeff Price Band recorded Greasy Window. It's alternative, it's from the album Big Time Songs. It's track number 5, it runs 3 minutes, 22 seconds. That's called metadata, those things. And they give it to Spotify. So Spotify gets that and Spotify goes, huh, who wrote the song? Just because Jeff recorded it doesn't mean Jeff also wrote it. Who wrote the song? We don't know. Well, the law that existed took that into consideration. And it said, you know what? If you're in a position where you don't know who wrote the song, and you put effort and you actually look to try to figure it out, you go to the Copyright Office database. It's a public database. You can all go to the Copyright Office database. And you can do what's called a public search. They keep records of all the copyrights that get registered with them. And you do a search and you can't find it, you put some effort into this. In that case, you, Spotify, can send this notice of intent to us, the Copyright Office, because it's going to be displayed publicly. It's going to be available to be found. And if you just send it to us, then you will also have a license. So you either get a license via direct license, by sending an NOI directly to Dolly Parton or the company that works for her, or if you can't figure that out, you send it to the US Copyright Office And in any of those three cases, the minute you do that, you get a license. You cannot be accused of infringing, stealing, taking someone else's property, intellectual property, and using it without a license. So you're covered. If you don't do these things, don't get a direct license, you don't send the NOI to who you know it is, the Dolly Parton, the company that works for, or you don't send it to the US Copyright Office, but you use it anyway, now you're kind of like the original Napster, you're stealing. You're taking a piece of property, intellectual property, and you're using it without a license, and that's called copyright infringement. Okay, so that is how Spotify gets the license. And again, I'll refer you to the definitive guide to Spotify royalties. I will put that link up. Like I said, this goes into excruciating detail on how this actually works, what the royalties are, and how they're calculated. But that's the important component of this. Spotify needed 2 licenses, one for the sound recording and a second separate one for the musical composition. The lawsuit that was filed around the musical composition, the lyric and melody. It was not filed around the recording. It was the second separate license. And the lawsuit that was filed says, hey, you didn't get a license. You didn't do any of these 3 things. So you're not licensed. That's infringement. So we're going to sue you. So now what I want to do is move into definitions that you should have. I'm going to do this very quickly. Again, you can dig into the definitive guide to Spotify royalties that spells this all out. It's important to understand who is actually suing here. I keep saying 8 Mile Style. Well, what is that? Who are these people? What does this mean? When you write a song and you put it into a fixed medium, you write it down or it gets recorded, you instantly become 3 things. You are the songwriter because you wrote it. Okay? That's an easy one. The second thing, and I'm simplifying things here, you are the music publisher. All right? This is just terminology we use in the music industry. So again, this is for the C. Songwriter and music publisher. You're the music publisher because you own that copyright. And you're a third thing. You are what we call a publishing, and I'm sorry, I'm writing so slowly, administrator. And what that means is it is you that license and collect the money for that copyright. You're 3 things. Now, the money that you're licensing and collecting comes from 6 rights types that are part of that. Okay, so you are 3 things: the songwriter, you wrote it; the music publisher, because you own it; the publishing administrator, because now you are licensing and collecting your money. Sort of 3 different segments. You can be a songwriter, but you cannot own it. You could be an owner, but not write it. You could be an administrator, but not do these things. So these 3 things can be pulled apart. When you're a publishing administrator, you're licensing and collecting the money. This is sort of I want to say, the non-creative side. You're not creating art and culture. You're dealing with legal contracts, royalty rates, licenses, compliance, auditing. And you're doing it for these 6 different rights types. And the 6 different rights types that you get are the right of public performance, and I'm just going to abbreviate this for simplicity's sake, public performance, reproduction, digital transmission. So digital transmission was added to deal with music being transmitted digitally through satellite and cable television. Public display, that's when you put up lyrics. Distribution, giving you the right to distribute commercially and non-commercially. And then derivatives, which I always misspell, and I apologize for that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. As a publishing administrator, it is your job to license and collect for the 6 distinct and separate income streams here, okay? And if you are the songwriter and the publisher, then by default, you're the publishing administrator until you assign these rights to another entity. In this case, we call you a self-published songwriter. Whether you know it or not, this is what you are. And each one of these has their own nuances. And I get into these in the Untangling the Mess video. Go and watch that. The ones that Spotify need for the composition touch on a couple of these. They need the right of public performance. They need the right of reproduction. They need the right of digital transmission. They need the right of distribution. And now Spotify is getting into lyrics. So we're getting into public display as well. Right? And they could get these rights from you as the publishing administrator because you represent this bundle of rights. Now, you could do a deal where you say, you know what, I don't want to deal with this crap. I just want to write my goddamn song, smoke some weed, get laid, play gigs, whatever. Totally cool. And if you like, you can do a deal with another entity, and that other entity then becomes the publishing administrator. So you are over here as the songwriter, you are over here as the music publisher, but this entity over here is doing the publishing administration. You could be Joe, and this could be Sony ATV. And now it is their job to license and collect that money on your behalf. I'm really sorry about the light. It keeps shifting and there's skylights here. So that's the background. So 8 Mile Style is an entity that represents not only the music publishing, I believe they own the copyright, but they also are doing their own administration. Versus they own the copyright and they hired somebody else to do the administration. I take that back. Whereas they hired someone else to do the licensing and administration. And this gets kind of interesting too, in as part of the lawsuit, because an entity called Cobalt got dragged into this lawsuit. And what happened is this: Spotify, when this lawsuit was filed, okay, and what happened is 8 Mile Style said, hey, listen, you're using our lyrics and melody. You're doing so without a license. You knew you didn't have a license. You used the Harry Fox agency to collude with you and do contributory infringement, include to commit fraud. Spotify said, well, not our fault, somewhat. You have this company that works for you called Cobalt, and they're your administrator. And, you know, and we thought we got the rights from them because, you know, they're your administrator. And if you read the lawsuit, what's interesting is the lawsuit says that although Cobalt works for 8 Mile Style, the way the deal was structured is Cobalt could not issue the licenses. It could only do the collection. So 8 Mile Style wanted to issue their own licenses and then hired another company to collect the money back. And the fact that Spotify was paying partial money or some money or no money, whatever, to Cobalt, or said Cobalt said that they were licensing to us, 8 Mile Style says, you knew that Cobalt didn't represent that, because in the complaint it says, you know, we told you they don't, years ago, multiple times, I think. So you can't use that to shield yourself. Another sort of interesting caveat. But anyway, that's the way a songwriter, music publisher, publishing administrator works. That's a self-published songwriter, or you do a deal with another entity, and that's called a publishing administration deal, and then your publishing administrator license and collects the money for those 6 rights types. So that's the background. So when you take that information and then you overlay it with getting the license for the musical composition, Spotify has to get the rights to the musical composition from the entity that controls them. If you're the songwriter and the music publisher, but another entity is working for you, then you should get those rights from that other entity. If you, however, represent them yourself, then those rights have to be gotten from you. And then you have those 3 ways to do it: a direct license, the compulsory license with a notice of intent, or if you can't figure it out, a notice of intent that gets sent to the Copyright Office because you tried to figure it out. I know, it's confusing, but that's the background. So now I'm going to stop because it's sort of a chunk of this, and I'm going to go over and look at the computer for 2 seconds. So again, Girl from Ipanema, while I go over here and see if there's any questions that title this project we clicked. Sorry while I mumble. Okay. There's a question here. I'm a self-DIY singer, songwriter, musician, was arranged with someone making money on my song, still making money. That I couldn't tell you. Okay. UK has Wixen. They are pretty good publishing admin, Guy and his kid. see. Okay. So now I'm going to move into, sorry, Jeff, just joining in. Sorry, guys, I apologize. It's hard for me to see the questions. Someone brought up sound exchange, completely different. I'll get to that. What is the label uses my audio contribution within the song and not acknowledging or paying me or coming to an agreement for a royalty rate? So that was DJ Jizzy's 6 times platinum. If there is a record label using a recording that you control, that's called a derivative work, they need to get a license from you, make a payment. And if they're not, then they're infringing on your copyright. Okay, so that is the background. Now we've got, how does Spotify get a license, right? How does that work? The difference between a publishing administrator, a self-published songwriter, and then we got the lawsuit, and the lawsuit that was filed. So with that as the context, let me revisit what I began with. The lawsuit is stating that Spotify, sorry, they're not up here anymore. Spotify took the lyric and the melody and did so and used it without a license from the publishing administrator or music publisher. They just stole it. And they did so knowingly, and that's important. If you do it by accident, that's innocent infringement. And when it's innocent, the amount of money that you can sue for is much, 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 much lower. It's like $30, $50, maybe $100 for each infringement. If it's willful infringement, and this is a legal definition, then the amount you can get awarded is much, much higher, up to $150,000 per infringement. So let me move into statutory damages. In the United States, the way we came up with our system was that if someone steals your intellectual property, right, your song, this intangible thing, it might be hard to figure out how much money you're losing, what that's actually worth. So rather than put the burden on you, the person that owns or represents that copyright, that seed, to try to figure out, using real hard data, I would have sold an extra 10,000 records. That would have equaled Y amount in dollars. It's kind of hard to figure out. So we're going to allow a judge or a jury to issue an award to you based on rules in the law. And one of the rules in the law says the court, judge or jury, can, at its discretion, reward up to $150,000 for each infringement if the infringement is willful. If it's not willful, then it falls into a different category. Well, the lawsuit states it's willful. The lawsuit states that Spotify knew it did not have a license for the musical composition, but chose to make the recording, and again, this is where it gets a little complicated. Here's the recording. It made the recording live to stream, Lose Yourself, right? Big Eminem song. And it knew it didn't have the second license. It had conscious knowledge of this. It wasn't a mistake. And that's willful. And the lawsuit cites evidence to support that. And you can read, again, you can read the lawsuit, and I'll put a link up here at the end where you can go read the lawsuit. But it's saying it was willful, and because it was willful, they can pursue these damages up to $150,000. So that's a big deal. And that moves into why and how could it be willful, right? Well, let's move into now the next section of the Harry Fox Agency and Spotify. What is that and how does that work? I'm just going to grab a paper towel. All right. So when Spotify launched its service in, I think it was June of 2011, it had done deals with all these entities that controlled the recordings, right? I was the CEO of TuneCore back in the old days, before it drove off a cliff, sorry to say. By the way, DistroKid, that's who I would recommend for distribution. But anyway. And I did a deal with Spotify, and we signed this contract for the recordings, and I sent them all the information. So Spotify did the direct licenses for the recordings. They made sure they were licensed. They created technology to take my information, keep track of the recordings, calculate royalties off of each stream, and then pay on a monthly basis the royalty rate that was negotiated with TuneCore, right? And it did the same thing with every record label or entity that represented them. And again, Definitive Guide to Spotify Royalties goes through this in a great detail and will explain it all. I'm just going to take a peek here to make sure mic is still working. Everyone can still hear me. There's a lot of messages here. Is Distro better than Root Note? I think DistroKid's best in show. That's my 2 cents to whoever just posted that. So you guys can still hear me? Everything's cool? Someone respond with a note saying, yeah, okay, cool, thanks. Okay. So they built the technology, the infrastructure for the recordings. That was one of the 2 licenses. Got to go to the other side of the fence. For every one of those recordings they were putting in the service, they needed that second separate license. And so what happened is, what appears to have happened is, Spotify hired a company to help them with that second separate license. And the company they hired is called the Harry Fox Agency. And it is a horrible name. I'm sorry, but it sounds like a porn star to me. Harry Fox Agency. Also known as HFA. So now I'm going to divert into what is HFA? Where does it come from? In or about 1914, 1917, the National Music Publishing Association came into existence, I believe. Maybe I have the date wrong, thereabouts. Trade organization representing the interests of its members. And in 1927, the National Music Publishing Association created the Harry Fox Agency. It was their company. They owned 100% of this organization. What was the purpose of this organization? Well, again, going back to the old days, before digital and streaming and downloads, record labels manufactured CDs, vinyl, recordings, and distributed them. Remember, the record label, the way it worked in the United States, the record label was responsible for getting the license to the lyric and melody. The license to the lyric and melody, by the way, and I've been negligent for not telling you this, the name that we give that is called the mechanical license. Just the terminology. It comes from the old days when there were player pianos and songwriters would write songs which would get punched into parchment. People would buy those, put them into the player pianos, and every time one of those piano rolls sold, it would generate 2 cents for the person that wrote the song. The piano rolls went into a mechanical device, so it got the name Mechanical Royalty, and that name stuck. So the second separate license that you get through the compulsory license with that notice of intent or through the direct license, it is called a mechanical license. So the Harry Fox Agency back in 1927, as you move through time, it played this weird role, right? If you think about the ways you can get a license, there were 2 ends of the spectrum. One was over here. This is the direct license. This is, I am Billy Joe Bob Records. It's 1985. My cousin Petunia has recorded I Will Always Love You. I want to manufacture it and try to sell it. I now need to get a mechanical license. I have 2 choices. I can call up Dolly Parton or the people that work for her and negotiate a direct license, or I can follow the US compulsory license. Now, the US compulsory license is not easy. It is a complex, geez, can you even see that? Sorry, man, I didn't mean to write it so that it draws it off screen. There we go. It is a complex license with lots of requirements. At the end of each year, you have to provide annual certified accountings. I can still see it's off screen. I see there's hands raised. I'm sorry, guys. I promise I'll come back to you all. It's hard to do the Q&A and the questions because the computer's over there and I'm over here. So once I'm done with this, I'll go there and I'll start to try to answer these questions. I'm sorry. I wish I had a better methodology. So you either have to get a direct license or a compulsory license. This was complex and hard. And if you call up Dolly Parton or people to say, listen, I want to do a direct license, they're most likely going to say, listen, with all due respect, Billy Joe Bob, and to your cousin Petunia, But honestly, the amount of time, effort, and money we're going to have to put in just to do this license will probably be more than we'll ever make. So you use a compulsory. Harry Fox came in kind of in the middle. And what Harry Fox did is it created a way to do what I call a scalable direct license. It took the compulsory license requirements and pieces of the direct license concepts, and it mixed them together. And it came up with a way for Billy Joe Bob now to get a license to a musical composition. They could go here and they could get this sort of hybrid between a direct license and compulsory. It was really a direct license. But Harry Fox built the infrastructure necessary to issue these licenses. Sorry, I'm going to write this a drop. To issue these licenses in a scalable way so people wouldn't have to follow the exact compulsory, and they didn't have to call Dolly Parton directly, and they would do that. And what would happen is the people, the publishing administrators that controlled the rights to this, which in the old days were members of the NMPA, by the way, right? Because it's a very insulated world back then. These members, and even some of the non-members, it was possible, would give Harry Fox their data and a rights grant. You can non-exclusively represent this for mechanical royalties and issue these licenses because you're a clearinghouse. And your job will be to issue these licenses, and in return also, you have to go and collect the money, audit it, chase it down, enter into lawsuits on our behalf because we're music publishers. And when you do, and you collect the money, you're going to take a piece of it, a fee for your service. You pay the rest to us, and then Harry Fox would take the fee that it collected and kick it back up to the NMPA to help fund it, right? And if you think about it, what you really had, sorry, man, there we go. For about the next, I don't know, whatever 1927 until 2015 is, whatever the span of time is, you know, almost 100 years, where you basically had a monopoly control over mechanical licensing and collection in the United States. Yes, it still happened outside of the system, but it was really happening through the Harry Fox Agency. And the major music publishers and the major music entities that were publishers own the NMPA, they paid its dues, they own this company, it would all flow around, right? That's what Harry Fox was. That's its roots. That's where it came from. It worked for the music publishers. It did not work for Spotify or the company that wanted to make the license. It was on this side of the fence. And as you go through time and up comes technology and downloads and streams, Harry Fox began to make less money because the amount of money coming in from mechanical royalties began to go down. And I'm sure there were other reasons involved that I just don't know. But ultimately in 2015, the National Music Publishing Association decided to sell its company, the Harry Fox Agency, and they sold it to a US-based company called SESAC, S-E-S-A-C, which is a company that works for songwriters and music publishers for one of those 6 rights that I listed for you, the right of public performance. So SESAC bought Harry Fox. I hear that it went somewhere between $22 to $25 million. Harry Fox got sold by the NMPA. That is what Harry Fox was. Let's move into what it is and why it's so damn confusing now. It's confusing because Fox's entire history until recently is working for the music publishers to collect the mechanical royalties that are being generated by the entities using the copyright. They were on team songwriter, team publisher. They were playing against team music service, team record label. They switched teams. In 2011, actually it must have been 2010, I just don't know the date, Spotify is coming into the US market. Spotify has built the infrastructure to license the sound recordings, but for the second separate copyright, the lyric and melody, they decided they were going to hire a company to help them. The company they hired to help them is the Harry Fox Agency, which is really weird because prior to that, or really prior to, that was probably the biggest one. They probably had some other examples, but Harry Fox was really known for being paid for making its money for the music publishers, making sure the music publishers were licensed, suing entities that used music publishers that they represented works without a license. That was their job. That is what they did. And they switched sides. What happened is Spotify said, Harry Fox, we want to hire you to work for us. We at Spotify, we're going to pay you. Your responsibility now is to us, right? Here's money we're going to pay you. You work for us. And now let's discuss what you're going to do for us. Spotify, Harry Fox switched teams. They're now working for the entity that used to be their adversary. They're putting Spotify, possibly putting Spotify's needs above the needs of the music publishers. Or maybe they're not, but there's certainly an inherent conflict here. If something goes wrong, who gets thrown under the bus? The music publishers or Spotify? Who will they have their allegiance to? Because what they did is they kept working for these guys while also working for these guys. Gets kind of weird. So let me explain to you how they worked. This gets into the lawsuit again and sort of the foundation of it. Why would 8 Mile Style bring Harry Fox into the lawsuit? Why would 8 Mile Style say, hey, this is willful copyright infringement? How do we know that? How do they know that? Now, why are they alleging that? Remember, all this is alleged. It's a lawsuit. And frankly, it's going to settle. That's my 2 cents. I don't think there's any way this is going to end up in a court. Hang on, just checking here because I see lots of Q&As. I see them all. I'm just double checking on the chat here. Bear with me. Oh my God, there's 32 minutes. There's so many messages. I'm so sorry. I know this sucks. I prefer doing this in person so I can just answer questions. Why do you think agency didn't join together as one society doing both? Someone asked me, why do I think HFA and CSEC didn't join together as one society doing both? They did. That is why they were required. So let me go back to this. So let's go into behind the scenes baseball. The crap that there's no way you could know. How do Spotify and Harry Fox work together, and how does this tie into the lawsuit? So let's go back to Spotify gets sound recordings from either record labels or DIY music distributors like DistroKid. Those come and get distributed to them. Now, when they get distributed to them, there's something that comes along with that called metadata, which is a fancy term to describe the words that describe music. What is the name of the recording artist? The Beatles, right? What is the name of the song? Let It Be. What is the name of the album? Let It Be. What is the release date? What is that, 1972, 71? I don't know the release date of Let It Be, right? So what is the release date? You put that. What's the name of the record label or the entity that controls the sound recording, EMI Capital, whatever it is, right? That information gets sent over to Spotify. That is for the first license. Spotify then says, hey, Harry Fox, we've signed this deal, okay? This deal, we're going to pay you money. Here's what we need you to do. We're going to send over to you a list of all the recordings that we got. Something called an ISRC is in there as well. That's a identifier. It's a 12 alphanumeric identifier for sound recording. So we're going to send this all over to you, Harry Fox. And now you, Harry Fox, are supposed to go through line by line each recording. Each recording has its own information, right? And this month, we got 1 million new recordings, which actually is a real number according to Daniel Ek, the CEO of Spotify. He says they get over 1 million recordings a month. You're going to get all these recordings. You, Harry Fox, have to go through each one of these recordings, and you have to connect the recording to the composition, the lyric and melody. Let's go back to Greasy Window. Jeff Price records Greasy Window. It gets distributed into Spotify. Spotify says, hey, Harry Fox, here's a recording called Greasy Window, performed by the Jeff Price Band. Here's its ISRC. Its release date is, July 1st, 2020. HFA then has to say, can I connect Greasy Window, the recording, with something that we have in our database of information called Greasy Window? So they run a computer query. Can this connect to that? No. We can't connect this to that. We don't know who wrote the song. Remember, in this case, my mom wrote the song. We don't know what it is. So what they do is they go line by line by line. And when they can connect it, oh, let it be the Beatles. Yes, that was written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney. The publishers are Sony ATV Music Publishing and whomever else it is. And when they are able to make that connection, then the rest of their job on behalf of Spotify is to send the notice of intent to the publisher, music publishing administrator that they have in their database. And by sending that notice of intent, Spotify is now licensed. Every time the recording streams, there's a royalty that's generated and can be paid. But if they can't connect it, if they say, I don't know what this is, then they're not sending an NOI, which means the composition is most likely not licensed. So Spotify sends them information and says, Harry Fox, tell me if this stuff is licensed, yes or no. Use this methodology. Harry Fox takes the computer output from Spotify, runs it through its process, and says no, 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 yes, no, 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 no. Lots of no's in there, well over 60% no's. And it sends the file back to Spotify. So it's really interesting. This is a really important point right here. At this point, Fox knows what is not licensed because it literally puts into the return file words to communicate that it's not licensed. The words they put in that they just chose are copyright controlled. And what that means is we don't know what to connect this recording to. We don't know the songwriter. We don't know the publishers. We didn't send out an NOI. They now know something's not licensed. They send it back to Spotify. Spotify sees the same information. Spotify also now knows it's not licensed. Let's use the Eminem sound recording, Lose Yourself. Here's the file, Lose Yourself. Spotify sends it to HFA. HFA sent back to Spotify for Lose Yourself. They put in the words copyright control. What they communicated is, we did not send a notice of intent. We did not license this. We didn't connect it. Why is beyond me. I mean, it was one of the most popular songs on the planet. Everyone knows where to get the license from. You could have taken 2 seconds to go to the US Copyright Office Board and look it up. You could have gone to the ASCAP or BMI websites and figured it out, whatever. But for whatever reason, they said, we don't know, no NOI was sent. Spotify gets that information back. So they're looking at it. Okay, license, oh, this one's not licensed. Now they have a choice. Should we make the recording live, even though we know it's not licensed for the composition? Because that would be infringement. Or should we make it live anyway? And they made it live anyway, according to the complaint, knowing that they didn't have a license. That's what the complaint alleges. That's infringement. Well, that's not Harry Fox's fault, right? That's Spotify's fault. That's Spotify making a decision, if what is being alleged is true, that we're going to make this recording live and we know that the musical composition isn't licensed. We're going to do it anyway. That's copyright infringement. We know we're doing it. It's willful, thus opening the doors. So that's kind of what's going on in the Spotify camp according to this complaint. So let's now go to, God, clearly I'm a talented artist here. Now let's go to the other side of the coin, which is HFA. So how does HFA get tied up in this? All right, so bear with me. Just got to clean this mess off. HFA gets tied into this because HFA knew that the composition wasn't licensed. How did it know? Because it looked it up and sent back a file to Spotify that said it wasn't. They knew it wasn't licensed. Now, Harry Fox Agency. Remember, It used to work for music publishers. It knows these rules and laws inside and out. It used to sue companies for the very thing that Spotify is being sued for. It knows intimately in its DNA that in order for a license to be gotten for the composition, it has to send that notice of intent within 30 days of first distribution. It knows this because it used to sue people over this. It knows this because it worked for music publishers and sued people over this. It knows this because it created benchmark legal cases over this. It knows this. And it's owned by the National Music Publishing Association that works for music publishers who know this. This is common knowledge. So how is Harry Fox dragged into this? Well, according to the complaint, what happened is the Harry Fox agency, and let me take a step back. According to the complaint, as I recall it, the sound recording for Lose Yourself, I believe, went live in the Spotify service in 2012. Could have been 2011, 2013, but let's put it 2012. The recording went live in 2012. Harry Fox was told by Spotify, remember that file that Spotify sends to Harry Fox? This recording, Lose Yourself, went live in our music service. Its first date of distribution was in, I'll make up a date, January 1st, 2012. It literally said that in the output that it sent to Fox. Fox got this file, apparently, years later, I guess. Fox got the file well after 30 days of first distribution. Fox knew that it could not send a notice of intent after the 30 days. A piece of paper sent after the 30 days is not a notice of intent. It's just a piece of paper with some words on it. For it to be a notice of intent, the license has to happen within those first 30 days. So again, if a sound recording goes live in 2012 and a notice of intent is sent in 2015, it's too late. You only have the 30 days. There's a reason for this, which is you basically want to have all your shit together as a music service. If you're going to use other people's stuff to make money, you should know whose stuff you're using before you use it ahead of time, and then pay them. You shouldn't be able just to grab people's stuff, use it, not know whose stuff you're using, and then maybe, 5 years later, I'll get around to figuring it out and maybe I'll pay them a royalty. That doesn't make sense. That's a stupid way to operate things. Anyway, Fox knows the 30 days have passed. Fox used to sue people over stuff like this. Fox gets a file years later from Spotify saying, hey, for Lose Yourself, it went live in 2012 or whatever the year was, send a notice of intent. Now, I'm thinking, and I have no way to know this, someone within Harry Fox is going, wait a second, we can't send a notice of intent. It's after 30 days. That would be invalid. That would be fraudulent NOI. That would be like trying to trick the music publisher into thinking they're licensed. We can't do that. I'm guessing somebody must have thought that because it's the Harry Fox agency. They know this stuff. It says it. Now, I'm guessing, and again, I don't know, this is what the complaint alleges. The complaint alleges that Spotify said, well, Harry Fox, send it anyway. Even though you know it's not valid, even though you know it's past the 30 days, even though you used to work for music publishers, throw the music publisher under the bus. Make us your priority and try to trick them into thinking they're licensed when they're not. That is what the legal complaint alleges. And Harry Fox, it alleges, did it. Well, I can tell you firsthand that at Audium, my company that I'm currently at, we have received these notices of intent that are backdated. They'll show a recording went live in 2011 and the notice of intent is getting sent out in 2015. You know, David Lowery from the band Camper Van Beethoven, excuse me, hang on, has a wonderful blog and website called The Tricordist. And if you type Tricordist, 5 things wrong with Spotify settlement, you will come to a blog posting he has where he literally has scanned the envelope that was mailed to him with the date stamp on it, and then a copy of the notice of intent that was inside showing the date that the recording first went live was years before it was mailed to him by the Harry Fox agency. Why would Fox do that? Unless they were throwing publishers under the bus in an attempt to trick them into thinking they were licensed when they were not. That's what the complaint alleges. Or maybe they just didn't care and they just said, well, I don't know, I'm just going to follow the orders of my new boss, Spotify, and do this thing that I know I shouldn't be doing. So that's how Fox got dragged into it. That's the first thing that the complaint alleges. The second thing that the complaint alleges is that Fox knew a composition wasn't licensed. Remember, it said, we don't have a license. It sent the file back. And yet it generated a royalty statement for a composition it knew was not licensed. You can't generate a royalty statement for something that is not licensed. There is no royalty rate, that's infringement. So the complaint alleges that Harry Fox colluded with Spotify to create these fictitious fraudulent royalty statements for compositions that knew it wasn't licensed, and then sent them out as a second way to try to trick the music publisher into thinking they were licensed when they were not. The first way was by sending these invalid notices of intent. Why would we ever think Harry Fox would send an invalid notice of intent? They used to work for publishers and sue over this. Clearly, this thing must be valid. And then the second way is, according to the complaint, here's a royalty statement. Oh, well, if I'm getting a royalty statement from Harry Fox, they're working for Spotify. Clearly, I must be licensed because I've got this royalty statement. And the complaint alleges that, no, Fox knew it wasn't licensed. They knew that the notice of intent was invalid. They couldn't send it. They sent it anyway, knowing it was well past the 30 days in an attempt to trick someone to thinking they were licensed when they weren't. And simultaneously with that, they would generate these royalty statements for stuff they knew wasn't licensed as a further way to induce and trick music publishers into thinking they were licensed when they weren't. That is how Fox got attached to this. So now I want to move to sort of the third phase of this. And the third phase, now remember, all of this is what is alleged in the complaint. And I want to be careful here because I don't want to get sued for libelous or slanderous statements. These are allegations in a legal complaint. There hasn't been a trial yet. There hasn't been, as far as I'm aware, there hasn't been a reply. Who the heck knows what's going to come out of this? I can tell you factually that these backdated NOIs exist. I've received them. David Lowery put it up on its website. Many music publishers have gotten them. What was the intent behind that? How did that happen? Who directed what? I'm just telling you what the complaint alleges. But what I want to point out is this next. Assuming, okay, and it's an assumption, that the things in the complaint are true. You know, we represented at Audium a company called Victory Records. We represented their sister company called Another Victory. Another Victory was their music publishing division, not their record label division, and it controlled musical copyrights. And at Audium, my company, we work for either self-published songwriters or publishing administrators. And we use this technology to untangle all this mess and find all the mistakes and stuff. We discovered, I think it was 2015, that there were about 55 million streams of sound recordings. Okay, 55 million streams of sound recordings of 5,000 compositions. So there are 5,000 recordings that streamed 55 million times. Each recording was of a different song, a composition. And when we figured this out and we went to Spotify and went to Harry Fox and we said, hey, you know, what's going on here? We've seen that there were 55 million streams of the recordings because we got the statements ourselves, from Victory, we could see the streams, but that second payment didn't show up for the composition. That mechanical royalty didn't show up. Hang on, that might be Richard Bush. Is that Richard? No. Okay. Sorry, I just wanted to see if Bush was showing up. I'm going to do a quick check. Hang on. 5 participants' hands, questions, chat, Q&A. Nope. Panels. Okay. Coming back. We saw 5,000 recordings, 55 million streams. Royalties were paid on the recordings for streams in the United States. That second royalty for the mechanicals hadn't been paid. We went back to Spotify and Harry Fox. Remember, Harry Fox works for Spotify. Spotify said, go talk to Harry Fox. They do all of our work. And we said, Spotify, Harry Fox, what's up? These streams occurred, over the last 5 years. These recordings were live in 2011, 2012. Where is the money? And ultimately, this is my own experience. This isn't in the lawsuit. My back and forth with Harry Fox, they admitted, oh, we didn't get the license, but we're sending a notice of intent now. Whoa. What do you mean you're sending it now? Oh, we thank you for connecting the recording to the composition. We're sending out those NOIs. And I said, whoa. This recording went live in 2011. It's 2015. You're Harry Fox. How can you be sending me an NOI? That's when the light bulb went off and I realized that there was all this infringement occurring. But I wanted to, even though this is alleged in the complaint, that is my direct personal experience. And if you go online and type into Google, Spotify, Victory Records lawsuit, you'll see all sorts of articles about this. David Lowery's blog posting. I mean, Harry Fox was doing this. They just were. And they were sending out these invalid NOIs. And for the life of me, anyway. So I'll leave you with that. Now, moving into the allegations, right? If Harry Fox was doing these things, they were sending out invalid NOIs knowing they were invalid because they were instructed to by Spotify, right? If they were sending out royalty statements for unlicensed compositions knowing they were licensed, if, according to the allegations, this was happening, think about the ripple effect of this. The NMPA owned 100% of the Harry Fox Agency at a time when the Harry Fox Agency was doing these things, alleged. So if these things are true, that means the organization that works for and represents music publishers owned the entity that was, according to the complaint, colluding with Spotify to commit fraud, send out invalid NOIs to induce its own members and other non-members into thinking they were licensed when they were not for Spotify. Why would that happen? Okay, I can speculate, and I don't know this to be true. But what I do know is Universal, Warner, and Sony, the three big major music publishers, they sit on the board of directors, UMPG, Sony, and Warner. They sit on the board of directors of the NMPA. There's some of the board, there's other board members, there are three of them. I also know that the NMPA charges its members dues. That's how much money they have to pay. And the amount of money paid to the NMPA by these entities is based on their market share, how much money they make annually. These are the three biggest money makers, right? So these three entities pay a large amount of money to the NMPA and sit on the board of directors. That's just a fact. Here's another fact. These three board of directors owned equity in Spotify. That is also simply a fact. Now, how much do they own? Somewhere between, I think, 8 to 14%. I don't know. Someone could probably dig it up from the Security and Exchange Commission's filings, but you can read in the press how each one of these entities, upon Spotify going public, made in the neighborhood of $1 billion. $1 billion by selling their stock. And we also know that the amount of money these companies make, sorry, that's Sony ATV, the amount of money these companies make from the sale or the license of pre-recorded music and the songs was going down, right? The market share that they had was going down. It only goes up when they buy other companies. They weren't increasing it organically, and that the do-it-yourself constituents, the people that use CD Baby or DistroKid or even TuneCore or RootNote or whomever you like, those people are selling a lot of music and they're making money, and that's eroding these guys' market share. Plus pirating, revenue is going down. They need a way to make more money. Now, Warner, if I remember correctly, was acquired by a very rich entrepreneur, billionaire from Russia. And it was an article I read many, many, many years ago who talked about how he had a strategy where he was going to leverage copyright. Remember, they own recordings and compositions, that's copyright, and make money not by the sale or the license of those copyrights, but by leveraging those copyrights to gain equity in technology companies like a Spotify. I'll let you use my music, but now you get to let me own a piece of your company. And when your company either gets bought or goes public, ka-ching, we're gonna make a shit ton of money, probably more than we would have made off of licensing or selling our music. So we're gonna come up with this new way to make money. And you know what? Nothing wrong with that. I applaud it. I think that's clever. I think that's smart. Take advantage of the technology companies. The problem that I have is when they made this money, they had no requirement to pay any of it to its artists or its songwriters. Because there's nothing in a recording contract that says you've got to pay me exit money when Spotify goes public, right? They get to keep it all. So that's my problem with it. But think about that. So the three largest paying dues members of the National Music Publishing Association own partial owners of Spotify, and they own 100% of the Harry Fox Agency. The complaint alleges that the Harry Fox Agency worked in collusion with Spotify to trick music publishers into thinking they were licensed when they weren't. Why would they do that? Because every time Spotify got sued for copyright infringement, the potential financial liability to them was in the hundreds of millions, if not billions. It was an impediment to Spotify going public. It just was. You know, you can't get your company public if you're being sued by music publishers for stealing your works with willful infringement, with your potential liability being $20 billion, which is literally what it would have been, if not more, right? Because you think how much music's in there and how much of it was unlicensed and multiplied by 150,000, they would have been sued out of existence. Maybe, and this is, you know, just a theory, maybe because they were partial owners of Spotify, they came up with a construct to protect their interest. Let's block the hockey puck from going, let's get this company public, because when we do, we can make all this money, which we don't have to pay royalties on, and we can use our own owned entity to accomplish it, right? That's a theory. Here's another one. While this was happening, while Harry Fox was engaged in these activities, according to the complaint, the alleged allegations in the complaint, the National Music Publishing Association did something I had never seen before. Spotify raised $2.5 billion with a B dollars in investment capital, private equity. 500 million of that came from something called debt. It's basically a loan. 2.5 billion. And Spotify had been accused of this copyright infringement repeatedly. I had never before in my professional career seen the National Music Publishing Association say that's okay. That this sort of scenario when you get a company that is being accused of this massive copyright infringement that raised $2.5 billion off of the works of its members, that's okay, that we shouldn't sue them. I mean, heck, they're going after everybody, which is a good thing, by the way. I'm glad they're there for that. They lobby to increase rates, but this one was weird, man. I couldn't figure it out for a while, and maybe I still haven't. So the NMPA, while HFA, according to the complaint, was doing these actions, began to lobby its own members and say, we want to do a Spotify settlement. What we want to do is remove the liability from Spotify so you can't sue them for these damages. And, you know, basically, you've been licensed. Now, whether or not they have is a conjecture. According to the 8 Mile Style complaint, maybe they hadn't been. Maybe they just were trying to be tricked into thinking they were licensed. So you've been licensed. The problem is that Spotify just hasn't been able to pay you because they can't connect the recording to the composition, to the songwriter, the publisher, and remit the payments. So sign this document, okay? And what we're gonna do is you're gonna waive your rights to sue them for these copyright infringement damages. Now they can get them closer to going public into the stock market. And at the same time, we're going to create a website where you can go into and see all the recordings that made money for these mechanicals. And now you're going to have to troll through all this and find these recordings of your songs, connect them together, and remit the information through this website. And when you do, you're going to get paid your portion of the $21 million sitting there, or 21 million-ish, that were earned in mechanicals that were never paid to you. The end result of the NMPA Spotify settlement, by the way, was, as I understand it, less than 10% of the $21 million actually got connected and paid out, and the remaining money, the 90-ish% of the money that was earned, ended up in a big pot going, well, heck, we don't know whose money this is. And when it got to the big pot of we don't know whose money it is, the NMPA Spotify settlement said, well, when we have that big pot of money that we don't know whose money it is, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take it and we're going to split it up and we're going to hand it out to the National Music Publishing Association members only, so nobody else can be part of this, even though we say we work for all of you. And we're going to pay it out based on your market share. So guess who got the bulk of the money? Universal, Sony, and Warner. Now, if I'm an NMPA member, you know, I would be frustrated. This wasn't how I wasn't supposed to waive my rights to infringement, not get the money I would have earned if I was licensed, and then find out in an allegation yet to be proved that the company that my organization owned potentially contributed towards infringement, included to commit fraud to make me think I was licensed when I wasn't. And now that I know, I can't even sue because I signed a document to waive my rights to do so. That's the domino effect of this. That speaks maybe to why I've been pressured not to do today's presentation. Anyway, again, I really want to reiterate, these are allegations in a complaint. There are facts. NMPA is a trade organization. These are board members. They do pay the highest dues. HFA is owned by NMPA. HFA did send out backdated NOIs. They sent out royalty statements for unlicensed compositions. 2.5 billion was raised by Spotify. There was an NMPA Spotify settlement. I mean, whether or not this all is true regarding the theories behind it, who knows? But you know, it does have me concerned. That's all. It has me concerned because that's just not right. Now, if that's not, that concept isn't bad enough. Now I'm going to move into the Music Modernization Act. Okay, well, this is the backdrop. The Music Modernization Act, given my opinion, it should never have passed. It was a mistake. That's my opinion. The laws and rules we had in place actually worked. The problem was no one was following them. And the lawsuits that could have come out of the infringement would have potentially put these new music services out of business. But then they shouldn't have infringed on copyright in the first place, right? I mean, if they didn't want to deal with the headaches of licensing music, they could have gone and sold shoes. They didn't have to say we're going to make our fortune off of the back of songwriters, publishers, and labels. So without getting, because the Music Modernization Act is its own 3-hour course. With that as a backdrop, here's what you need to know about the Music Modernization Act, in my opinion. It has a number of things bundled together. So it's what we call an omnibus bill. It wasn't just one component. It touched on pre-1972 sound recordings. It touched on producers getting paid through sound exchange and so forth. But I'm going to focus on an element of it called the Mechanical Licensing Collective, MLC. The NMPA claims credit for drafting the bill which became the law. And they drafted this prior to Spotify going public, just so you're aware. The first thing, the Music Modernization Act, not the first thing, one of the things, these are all things in the Music Modernization Act. So one of the things in the Music Modernization Act, by the way, I'm wondering if I have ink on my fingers and I'm rubbing under my nose, giving myself a Hitler mustache. So forgive me for a second. Probably don't, but best to make sure. Otherwise, I'm going to be like in a Larry David Curb Your Enthusiasm episode. Anyway. One of the things in the Music Modernization Act that happened was the Music Modernization Act was revealed around December 23rd, a couple days before Christmas. And the Music Modernization Act as a bill said, you have until December 31st to sue to be eligible for statutory damages up to $150,000 per infringement. So they released the bill on December 23rd, 2 days or 3 days before Christmas when no one was around, giving people literally 8 days to file lawsuits to be eligible for these statutory damages. And if the bill was passed, the bill said, and if you didn't file by December 31st, you're shit out of luck. You can't pursue these statutory damages provided the music services do these other things, right? The bill hadn't even passed yet. So part of the Eminem 8 Mile style complaint, the lawsuit says that's unconstitutional. You can't take away someone's property right retroactively and deny them the ability to pursue a remedy like this. That's what it alleges. It hasn't been a ruling yet. It says that there's an unconstitutional portion of the Music Modernization Act. We'll see what comes out of that. If this thing even makes it to trial, I am convinced there's no way this thing's going to make it to trial. Think of what's going to come out based on what I just showed you. Anyway, so that was the first thing. The second thing that came out, or that was in the bill that's really important, is remember the way this used to work? If a music service wants to use somebody's music, they had to know whose music they were using ahead of time, get the licenses ahead of time, 30 days of distribution, and then remit the payments and make sure they got paid. And if the person wasn't paid, okay, if they were licensed and the payment didn't make it, they held on to the money. You can go back and you can recover that money, okay? Two things that came out of the Music Modernization Act you should be aware of. Number one, provided the music services follow the rules of the Music Modernization Act as outlined in the law, they will instantly have a license to every single musical work, composition, lyric, and melody on the planet, past, present, and future, and will no longer need to know who anybody is, and will no longer need to ensure anybody gets paid. Free and clear. It lifted the entire burden off of them. You no longer need to know whose music you're using. You no longer need to know if anyone's getting paid. We're granting you the magic fairy wand grant. You are protected. You are licensed. No one can sue you for infringement. And don't even worry about paying anybody. That's the first thing. The second thing is they created an entity called the Mechanical Licensing Collective, MLC. What's going to happen in the Music Modernization Act? We're going to create this organization called the MLC. The Mechanical Licensing Collective will receive from the music services all of the information and all of the money for this mechanical royalties from these interactive streams. Okay, it's going to get all of it. And we at the Mechanical Licensing Collective will issue the license, that sort of blanket license, the Magic Fairy Wand license. That is for what I'm calling pure Section 115, that's the copyright law, vanilla mechanical licenses. It's a very, very bland, non-exciting, neutral rights grant. In other words, if you want to stream a recording and show lyrics, you can't get that lyric right from the Mechanical Licensing Collective. Remember how I listed those 6 rights? Only one of them, the right of reproduction, and then a subsection of the right of reproduction for interactive streams for mechanicals. That's all you can get from the Mechanical Licensing Collective. You can't get public performance rights. You can't get synchronization rights, right? Spotify is beginning to roll out videos. Amazon's rolling out music videos. Apple's rolling out music videos. You can't get that license from the Mechanical Licensing Collective. By the way, that means if you're using the Mechanical Licensing Collective as the entity to collect for you and license for you, you are not eligible to be included in Apple Music with lyrics, unless Apple gets a second separate license from you or company working for you for that lyric right? So you're going to be excluded from stuff. If you are direct licensed with the music service, like an Apple Music, okay, so, and I will use Audium. Audium represents a bundle of rights. We represent, a bundle of those 6 rights. We can enter into a direct license deal with Apple that includes not only the mechanical royalty, but also the lyrics and synchronization, and even public performance for that matter. We can do the bundles, and then we circumvent the entire Mechanical Licensing Collective. Our stuff doesn't even go through them. We license, we collect directly from the music service. We don't have to go near that thing. And you're also eligible to be part of all the other subsections, all these other things within the music service. If you're a songwriter, self-published songwriter or music publisher, and you're just going through the Mechanical Licensing Collective, and you don't have the additional rights grant to give them for synchronization, for public performance, which they'll get through the PROs, or for public display, or even something like Pandora, which has these things where the consumer can watch a specific video of a commercial and then they can listen to the song they want. You can't get that license through the MLC. That's not a pure vanilla Section 115 mechanical, just FYI. So anyway, Mechanical Licensing Collective gets all the money and the data for the applicable things they represent sent to them. Now, the Mechanical Licensing Collective also does not need to know who anybody is and does not need to ensure anyone gets paid. It just gets all the information and all the money. Now, its job is to get everybody paid, but it doesn't have to ensure that it happens. As a matter of fact, the NMPA, who drafted the bill, put in a specific sentence that said, in the event there is money that has been generated, okay, remember now, everything's generating money because everything's automatically licensed, and we can't find the person or the entity to pay, unlike the old days where we could go back and recover this money, we're going to put a provision in that says this money, this unpaid money for people we can't find or entities we can't find, we're going to put aside into something called accrued but unpaid royalties. Big pot of slush fund of just money, just the drippy, ugly, spotty, dirty, we don't know whose money it is money. Fuck it, we don't know whose it is. For whatever reason, bad data, wrong data, incomplete data, malicious reasons, non-malicious reasons, okay? Or just an honest mistake. It's gonna go in this big pot. And after a period of time, we're gonna take the money that's in this big pot from all these other people, and we're gonna hand it out to the people that did not earn it. Universal, Warner, Sony, and others based on their market share. The board members of the NMPA that helped write this bill. And on top of taking this money and handing it out to those that most likely didn't earn it, the people that we're giving it to don't even need to use the Mechanical Licensing Collective. They're going to be direct licensed. So by default, the money that we have can't be theirs. So we know now we're giving people money that most likely isn't theirs. And here's the real kicker. On top of all of that, guess who the board members are of the Mechanical Licensing Collective, whose job it is to ensure you get paid? Universal, Warner, Sony, and the big music publishers that are all members of the NMPA that have decent market share. So they literally, this is bizarre, because of this one sentence, they are incentivized to not pay you. And if you don't get paid, the money goes into a slush fund. They get to take it and hand it out to themselves and others based on market share. Now, clearly those in support of the Mechanical Licensing Collective goes, you know, that's insane. You know, we set up these committees. We have the Accrued but Unpaid Royalty Committee. And you know what? There is the Accrued but Unpaid Royalty Committee, and it's got good people on it. Really, these people give a shit, but they're powerless. The board controls it. And plus, why the fuck should we have had to make a committee to stop the wolf from guarding the hen house? Why didn't we just pass a law that didn't have the wolf guarding the hen house in the first place, so we wouldn't have to make committees to try to stop them from doing bad things? So that's my issue with the Mechanical Licensing Collective, which is if they remove that one freaking sentence, and it really is one sentence, and I wrote a blog posting about it, and I analyze it for you, that put this in there that says, hey man, we can take other people's money and hand it to ourselves, and we can sit on the board of directors and not even use the entity. At least this bill would make more sense. I would 100% support it. I might think, I don't know if they can pull it off. But the inherent conflict of interest isn't there. And I personally don't trust it. I personally don't believe them that they're going to work hard to make sure that Joe Smith in Boise, Idaho, or Joe Smith in Bristol, England, or Joe Smith in Greece, London, France, London doesn't count, that's England, or Nigeria, or Nairobi, or Vietnam, or Spain, or Portugal, or anywhere on this planet, I don't believe that the people that sit on the board really care that the person living in Greece or Italy or France or Spain or England or the inner city of the United States or the inner cities of this country, I don't really think that they care if they get their money. I don't believe that they're going to fight and go the extra mile to get that person their extra 15 cents, their 20 cents, their $5, their $15. I don't believe you, because if you don't pay them, you get to take their money. That's my problem with the MLC. I hope to God I'm wrong. I offered to be on the board of directors of the MLC. If I had been on the board with some other people that we put together, if we were the board, you know what? My own company, Audium, probably would be shutting down or out of business. I only exist because of things like this. The people out there that don't like me, make me irrelevant, please. I don't create my companies in order to enrich myself. I create my companies to stop you from enriching yourself off of other people's hard work. It's not right. Make me irrelevant. Anyway, so that's one of my major problems with the MLC, the inherent conflict that exists there. Now, here's where it gets even weirder. You got that whole thing about the NMPA and Universal Warner Sony and the Harry Fox Agency, and now the Harry Fox Agency allegedly has been accused of contributory infringement, including with Spotify, to commit fraud, to trick music publishers into thinking they're licensed when they're not licensed. Well, guess what? When this bill was written, right, it needed to pass through Congress, and it hit a road bump, it stopped. It stopped because the entity that owns CSAC, the US organization, is it Blackstone, BlackRock, Blackstone, I think, has lobbyists on Capitol Hill. And apparently Ted Cruz stepped forward, of all things, Ted Cruz, the senator, and got involved, and the bill stopped passing through. They threw their weight, they threw their political weight through lobbyists to get the bill to stop. And the NMPA went to CSAC, and they had to meet, and they had to talk about, why aren't you letting the bill through? And you can look online, and you can find this in Billboard. It's the NMPA CSAC meeting. I think it was in August of 2017? I don't remember. It was August. I don't remember the year. Apparently, the NMPA and CSAC, Harry Fox, reached some agreement. And the next thing you know, the Music Modernization Act was changed. The original version of the Music Modernization Act allowed the Mechanical Licensing Collective to license public performance and mechanicals and lots of other rights. After the confrontation and negotiation with CSAC, the bill got changed so it could only represent the mechanical royalty, right? And thank God, thank you CSAC, Blackstone, thank you guys. But look what came out of it. Here's the next step, the next Game of Thrones piece of the puzzle on the chessboard. The Mechanical Licensing Collective has a board of directors. What it does not have is technology. The people that run the board of directors are people from the music industry. The music industry creates art and culture. We're real good at that. We create fame. The music industry, for the most part, doesn't create smartphones or neural networks or big data databases in the cloud, right? That automate and load balance. It's just not what we do. So we have these people that sit on the board of directors, which frankly aren't qualified on the technology side. They're definitely qualified on the music publishing side, but one would think that you're gonna have a board of directors of an organization that's around massive amounts of data and money. You wanna have people from the board of directors that have some expertise in creating infrastructure and technology and business logic around those concepts, not the very same people who traditionally don't have a very good track record at paying music royalties. Right, let's face it, the traditional music industry, the royalties system is the dirty little thing they never had to deal with. It was the pain in the ass. And royalties were always just, they were guesstimates because you never knew what you sold, and it was a pain in the butt. And most artists didn't succeed. And if they did succeed, fine, they can come do their audits. And when they audit, they get some more money. And if they kick and scream loud enough, fuck it, here's a check for an advance for your next set of royalties. And let's just move on our way. It was always a guesstimate. It was always fuzzy math. And now these same people that do the guesstimate and fuzzy math sit on the board of directors of the Mechanical Licensing Collective, who passed a law that says, let's create a bucket for the fuzzy math money and do what we always did, split it up between ourselves at the expense of the people that actually earned it. So that's who sits on the board of directors. So they needed to hire a company or companies to provide the technology backend to help them with this infrastructure, because they need to build this complicated technology thing to take in trillions of lines of data, trillions of interactions and piles of money with the royalty rates going off, sometimes, 20 places to the right of the decimal point, fractions and fractions of pennies, keep track of all this stuff and create a system where someone can come, like the kid in Nigeria can come, or Spain, and understand the website and log in and enter their data, and it's got to be in different languages, and you need customer support, and then these people need to be able to get a royalty statement paid to them and direct deposits into their bank. I mean, think of this. This is huge, right? So they hired a company to help them with this. A technology company. Guess who they hired? The Harry Fox Agency. So the Harry Fox Agency, owned by CSAC, right, who stopped the bill from passing, lo and behold, they come out of that, the bill gets passed, and then later on, it is announced by the National Music Publishing Association, who used to own 100% of Harry Fox, has been accused, right, alleged accused in this lawsuit that they've infringed on copyright, contributed towards it, colluded with Spotify to trick music publishers into thinking they were licensed when they weren't, while simultaneously the NMPA is getting music publishers to sign off an agreement waiving the rights to sue for statutory damages, and the 3 board members control an equity position in Spotify where they've each made over $1 billion, and then they pen the Music Modernization Act saying, well, you're going to sit on the board of directors and control it, where we can take other people's money and hand it to ourselves and not even have to use the organization. And guess who we're going to hire to help us with their back office technology? Harry Fox. Welcome to the Mechanical Licensing Collective. So these are some of the issues I have with it. The Harry Fox Agency 3 or 4 days ago sent out an email to everyone who music publishers they had in their email database. And they actually said, hey, the Mechanical Licensing Collective, why don't we give them the data we have on file for you? We'll just, we'll give it on over to them. We just need your permission. No, are you nuts? Your data is so bad and it is so wrong. These are my experiences. I send you data, you don't even update your systems. I don't hear back from you. I don't get return files. You include wrong information of who owns what. You want me to have you send my data to the Mechanical Licensing Collective to perpetuate bad, wrong, and incomplete data, which means that the money that is earned by these compositions is going to end up possibly in this accrued but unpaid black box so these people can take it? What are you, nuts? And now you've been sued, alleged sued for contributory infringement, and on top of that, collusion to commit fraud, and you're asking me to send my data? What are you, nuts? So all of you that are out there, yes, you should register with the Mechanical Licensing Collective. Yes, you should. Or if you're with Audium, we're going to register for you. There's no way in hell I'm allowing Harry Fox or anyone else to input data directly into the Mechanical Licensing Collective because they're not good at it. And I don't trust them based on my experiences. So if we work for you, we'll do it for you. If we don't work for you, for the love of God, don't have Harry Fox perpetuate bad, wrong, incomplete data. Go to the Mechanical Licensing Collective directly. Enter your own information directly. Don't put a middleman between yourself and that. So that's my spiel on the Mechanical Licensing Collective. HFA, the NMPA, mechanical licensing, Spotify infringement, statutory damages, a lot of information. And I think I'm done with my rant. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to grab my computer and I'm going to try to answer some of these questions. And I'm also going to grab a sip of water and hope to God there isn't a sniper somewhere looking to take me out. Okay. Let's see what we got. Oh boy. So forgive me, I'm now scrolling through my goodness, a lot of questions. RW, hey Jeff, from what I've read, the Music Modernization Act is supposed to benefit songwriters, producers, and engineers, but I see you mentioned it'll hurt them instead. Can you explain where the harms are? Thank you. I think I've touched on that, but yes, the Music Modernization Act does benefit producers. There's different provisions of it. Now I gotta sit down. There are different provisions of the Music Modernization Act that deal with getting, there are some good things in there. As a matter of fact, the Mechanical Licensing Collective isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just that, the inherent conflict of interest is sucky. But I touched on that. Is HFA necessary once MLC is active? No. Remember, HFA works for the music service now, really no longer works for the music publishers. They claim they do, but then they've tied up in this lawsuit. So HFA also is being paid millions of dollars over the next 5-10 years by the Mechanical Licensing Collective to be their back office. So they're going to be involved whether you like it or not. Who will own the data, HFA or MLC? Great question, Cindy, because HFA claims it's still going to be in the market. It's still, I'm all tilted here, I apologize for that. It's still going to be in the market, and it's going to be competing with other entities like Music Reports as an example. So the question then becomes, is the information that's given to the MLC, is that going to be repurposed by the Harry Fox agency in order to give them a hand up in the free market to compete and do other things? The information should be owned by the MLC, not HFA. But, you know, my own experiences with Audium with HFA put into writing in a motion to the court during Spotify lawsuits that it considers itself Audium's competitor, and that the information that they have, they consider to be trade secrets and proprietary in order to benefit their business, and yet they're demanding it of all of us to give to them. Again, inherent conflict. But hey, this is what happens when you have lots of money and lobbyists. So it should be the MLCs, but we'll see what happens there. If I'm only making money from BMI, where else should I be collecting from as a producer, publisher, and administrator? Slayer Tracks, forgive me. It's a great question. Let me refer you to Untangling the Mess and the Definitive Guide to Spotify Royalties. Will this video play again? Yeah, I'm going to upload it to my YouTube channel. Oh, I got to give you guys the link. So let me go in while we're doing this, and I'm going to populate into the, hang on. I'm going to populate into the, whatchamacallit, the chat here. Let's see. Untangling the Mess. All right, so first I'm going to give you, here is the link to Untangling the Mess. All right, so this is the other video I did. So go, hopefully you guys all get that. And let's see, here is the Definitive Guide to Spotify Royalties, which I went on and on and on about. I really do encourage you to read that. It really will help. Link to Definitive Guide to Spotify Royalties. Okay. If you read those and watch that, it really should answer many, many questions. So let me keep going. Jeff, why is Cobalt Music Publishing considered the third-party defendant? Has it been like that from the start? Did they administer the publishing rights? So Noah, I believe I answered that question in regards to the role that Cobalt was playing. They were hired by 8 Mile Style to collect the money, but 8 Mile Style did the licensing, and Cobalt is sort of getting caught in the crossfire there. Let's see. You mentioned on Twitter, what? Not using the MLC for digital mechanical technology. Okay, I actually don't. I mean, look, we're stuck with the MLC. It is, it's the conflict of interest that concerns me, but I encourage all of you to register there. I encourage you to know as much about it as possible. I encourage you to understand when recordings of your song stream, you're owed money from the Mechanical Licensing Collective. If you go through something like Audium, we're going to handle all this for you. We're going to direct license. The MLC won't even really come into play, but we'll register data there for sort of the smaller services that we're not direct licensed with. And just like we do with the bigger services, we'll audit the inbound statements and find all the problems and go recover that money before it ends up in those slush funds to be given away to other people. Cindy's asking me about Wix. Let's see. Sorry, I'm reading through questions. You mentioned that you have to have a license for posting lyrics. How is this the case? Most websites like Genius display lyrics for free. Is that legal? So Noah asked me this question. No, you do need a license for lyrics. You know, lyrics are like a book, right? It's just much shorter. I can't go and take John Irving's novel, The Cider House Rules, and just put it up on my website. That would be infringement. Nor can I take the lyrics from a Bob Dylan song or your song and put them on my website. I need a license from you to do so. That's the right of public display. So with things like Genius, Apple Music Genius, Audium is licensed with Apple. We grant that license to them. And by the way, because we're granting that license to them, you're making more money because you're not only getting paid the mechanical royalty, but you're also getting paid an incremental royalty for the lyrics, and it makes more money. You won't get that through the MLC because they can't do the lyric right grant per the law. But if you're through somebody like Audium or a bigger publisher that are direct license, you will be able to benefit from these. Do you recommend we collect the publishing, or who do you recommend as a publishing administrator? So Jose, by default, you are the publishing administrator, and you can do this yourself. My recommendation, if you're a self-published songwriter, you don't need to give up your publishing rights in the US or Canada. That just doesn't make sense. Become a member of a performing rights organization. They will mop up and collect your public performance royalties, and then use a company like Audium, or use Audium. And we'll deal with your YouTube revenue if you want, and if you don't, that's okay. And we'll deal with the mechanical royalties from the streams and the lyrics in the US and Canada. So US and Canada, you got covered. Outside the US and Canada, there is no real mechanism that exists yet, and that's where you want to do your publishing admin deal until those new pipelines, sorry, I'm tangling on my own cord here, are created. In regards to what publishing admins to use, sorry, now I'm getting my power cord. There's a lot of them out there. You know, one of them that I do think highly of, and I think very highly of the president, is a company called SongTrust. But I could work for SongTrust. We work for publishing administrators. SongTrust does something I don't like. SongTrust will say to you, well, you can't use SongTrust to collect the money from outside the United States and Canada unless you give us the rights to the United States and Canada. And even you said, but I don't need you for those. They're like, well, tough. In my opinion, they're leveraging you to give up money to them from the US and Canada in order to allow you to type into their pipeline to the rest of the world. And to me, that's not cool. They shouldn't be doing that. Let's see. When the NMPA to HFA, did HFA work with Spotify to commit fraud and infringing copyright against NMPA and non-NMPA members? Well, Michelle, that is what the lawsuit alleges. It certainly does suggest that. And we got to see where that lands, but that is what it suggests. How does Apple Music play a part in all this? Do they operate differently? Well, Apple Music is an interactive streaming service like Spotify. So they work the same way, had the same rules and same licenses. Apple, however, did something very unique. And that is when they launched Apple Music, they really aggressively pushed for that direct license, not the compulsory. And the way they got people to do this is they said, you know what? The compulsory license says we have to pay you X. We're willing to pay you, 3% more than X. We'll even pay you more money. So Apple, I don't want to say induced because that sounds like a bad word, but Apple got people to direct license with them through direct licensing contracts. And my experiences with Apple have been, no, they're not perfect, nobody is, but they work to be as great as they can, as good as they can. And I found them to be a willing, good partner with good intentions, doing things that in some cases others do not do. When we get to vote, it's called the MLS. Let's see. Sorry, I'm scrolling through here. So going through the MLS is not running. I was under the impression we all need to do that. So Samuel, yes, again, I told you my problems with the MLC, but we're all stuck with it. Let's make do. Yes, you should register with them directly, or alternatively, affiliate with Audium, and you won't even have to deal with it. We'll do it all. Correct, Cindy. MLC is only digital, not physical. I'm sorry if I didn't articulate that. The MLC is for interactive streams. That's from places like Spotify and Apple Music. It has nothing to do with downloads, and it doesn't have anything to do with physical. Is there a statute of limitations on willful infringement? Yes, 3 years from when you first know about it. If you don't get that lawsuit in. What I haven't even touched on are the requirements of the Music Modernization Act that limit the liability. That's a whole other mouthful. I'm going to table that for a moment. Will there ever be an agency that streamlines all this collection? For example, now I use ASCAP, Sound Exchange, Audium, Cobalt, Music Reports, and HFA. And this is to Benjamin. No, there will not. You could get a manager, and then a manager can deal with all of this for you, right? But these are different rights used in different ways from different entities and different organizations. Sound Exchange has nothing to do with the lyric and melody. That's a composition. Sound Exchange has to do with the sound recording. Completely different. 2 different rights types. So these are different things. How do we solve this issue with transparency? You should have a board of directors of the mechanical licensing collective that don't benefit by not paying you. Let's start with that. What proposals would work? I've heard people talk about blockchain and audible streaming, publishing data, especially since streaming services are complicit in what is essentially money laundering. I don't know if they're complicit in money laundering. Blockchain, people think very highly of it. To me, 6 one, half a dozen of another. For blockchain to work, someone's got to enter the data to begin with. And although I do know it keeps a record of changes to the data and who made it when, if the data is not right in the entry, it's not going to be right. Plus, I believe it can be hacked at some point in the future. And I'd rather have a one-to-one relationship. I'd rather me give the information directly to the music service and then they pay me back off of that than me rely on some third-party database somewhere. By the way, the Mechanical Licensing Collective and the MMA have called for the creation of a database which will contain all the information around musical works so anyone can tap into it and gain access to that information to make their lives easier. But Sug said, where's the links? I put them in the, don't worry, I'll get to the other thing. I put them in the text messages to all participants. You should have found them there. How do we solve this issue with transparency? We just did that, sorry. Do you help us in the UK? Yes, so it doesn't matter where in the world you live. What matters is where the music is streamed through something called the Berne Convention, B-E-R-N-E. The laws of the country where the exploitation, where the stream occurred is what applies. So it doesn't matter where in the world you live, if you live in England or France or Germany or Greece, and the recording of your song streams here in the United States, the rules in the United States will apply. And if you don't know about them, you know, geez, I left this out, I'm sorry. If you do not register with the Mechanical Licensing Collective, you are not eligible to get the money that you've earned. So you all need to know that. So if you're a kid somewhere on the planet, you don't know this, by default, you've earned money, you're not going to get it, they're going to take it from you, which I think was done specifically to prey on ignorance, and it's not cool, which is why they should have put that sentence in there. But yes, you should register, and even if you live in England, you've got to go to this website. By the way, here's something I'm worried about. You know, this is a quasi-governmental organization, the Mechanical Licensing Collective, and it's requiring all people on the planet to go and register with them, name, address, phone numbers, ways to get them paid, what music they wrote, how much revenue they're making. Think about this. There's going to be a lot of people out there, particularly in the time of Trump, which are uncomfortable with this. And now let's get into the inner cities. I'm sorry, yeah, I'm a white Jew from New York City that lives on the Upper West Side, but the #1 musical genre on the planet that is created, distributed, and generates more revenue is what? It's hip hop, it's rap. And #2 behind it is like Latino, right? So you've got this music being created, which the people that create it are disproportionately have access to information, education, or resources to even understand this. And yet they're generating a disproportionate amount of the money. I mean, talk about institutionalized racism. Think about that. And then add on top of that, you live somewhere in a socially depressed, monetarily depressed income, or you're a minority in this country, you're going to be required to register with a quasi-governmental organization in regards to your income? How many people are going to want to do that? Just, you know, pointing it out. All right. Do you recommend something for DistroKid's new lyric service? Sure, why not? I love DistroKid. The European societies do pan-European licensing for digital. That is true, Cindy, they do. They don't come into the US. Let's see, is there a way to collect royalties overseas without giving away your self-publishing rights? So Dara, it's a great question. There is a way to collect the money from public performance. Every time there is a stream on a Spotify or an Apple Music, it generates public performance royalties and mechanical royalties. There are pipelines to collect that public performance royalty by becoming a member of like SOCAN, ASCAP, BMI, CSAC. They've created the pipelines. That second income for the mechanical royalty, those pipelines don't exist. There's partial, there's rubber band and glue, there's ones that are inefficient that don't work. But no, usually you're going to have to trade your eye, your tooth, or some limb in order to, or give up revenue in the US or Canada to gain access to the rest of the world, which is a real shame, but it's just leveraging. But once again, you know, that's a gatekeeper. They'll be circumvented. It will happen. But until then, we're kind of all stuck with it. Let's see. When YouTube recently took on trying to find stuff in here. Does Zonium Collective music played on social media sites, including TikTok, says Slayer Tracks. We just expanded our licensing to license to Facebook, TikTok, Twitch, Peloton, Equinox, and others. We negotiate deals. We are not yet done negotiating with TikTok, but that's part of the plan. Can I address Canadian copyright and how Canadians deal with lack of protection, as we do not have a Library of Congress like the US? We rank 17th in the world. Did you know this? Can you address the lengthy unclaimed works listed at SOCAN and your previous distrust with the PROs who seem to have changed your tune? From Melissa Walker. The US market I know inside and out, and I can tell you this, as a Canadian, what happens here in the US impacts you. Okay, if your music streams here in the United States, you're owed public performance royalties and you're owed mechanical royalties. I don't know much about SOCAN's accrued but unpaid. I'm under the understanding they don't have a black box. And no, I'm just not familiar enough. Although I did testify, and I was asked to come testify in Canada with Facebook and YouTube and Google. Yeah, Google Play, and I can't remember who, and Spotify in front of your committee in regards to royalty rates. But I just don't know enough about your lack of protections or your black boxes. I'm sorry. Do we work to, does Audium work to help musicians or only songwriters? Neither. Audium works for the publishing administrator. Remember those 6 rights types? If you do that yourself, I can work for you. If you did a deal with somebody else to do that for you, I can work for them. So I can work for the publishing administrator. Who gets the licensing for covers on YouTube and for record releases? I'm not quite sure I understand the question. Covers on YouTube. So Audium represents songwriters and music publishers. We would go into YouTube on behalf of the publishing administrator. We would find those videos doing covers. We would say, hey, YouTube, this is a cover of a lyric and melody that we represent. We're authorizing this to monetize. And so we would collect that money. And publishing administrators do that. Melissa Walker says, I will always love you is on the unclaimed works list 91 times. Yeah, that's real hard to figure out. Hi, Jeff. What is considered ample proof of intent to discover the songwriter before NOI can be sent to the Copyright Office? And that's from Ian. Ian, I don't remember the language word for word out of the, I got to sit down because this couch sucks. Okay. I don't remember the language word for word out of the regulation, but if I recall correctly, they at least have to make an attempt to look for it in the US Copyright Office database and do a search there. Okay. Who knows if this is my good side. Is enlisting a PRO basically the same as doing the digital mechanical collection option inside of Audium then? From Brendan, no. Doing a PRO deal means they're going to collect your public performance royalties. Audium collects a second separate right. Remember those 6 I listed? We do the right of reproduction. We do the mechanical royalties, which is separate from public performance royalties. So there's no overlap. We're not working against each other. It's 2 separate rights types, 2 separate income streams. I'm a game composer. Let's see. I want to collect my recordings of conversation I do in my spare time. Sorry, I'm trying to read this quickly. I do want to collect all, is there a way to comment some stuff on it? Yeah, so Brendan, may I suggest you just email support@audium.com directly with the question and we can respond to you at length. Okay, so now I'm moving over to the other list, and forgive me, there's oh my gosh, there's a lot in here. I'll try to do my best for the participants, which is a whole separate window, which have comments which keep rolling in. Oh, Spotify is former Napster, CEO, customer reflection, the mayor of Marvin's house is a ranch. I don't know what that means, but I'm going to keep going. Let's see. The FBI is responsible for crimes like this. MMA is on. Okay. I'm trying to find some questions here. Thanks, Trent. Trent told me the whiteboard looks right. Oh, no, David, you couldn't hear me. I guess it was just you. Sorry about that. Sorry, just scrolling through and recovering songwriters. So Manny Manhattan says the MMA is limiting liabilities for copyright infringement, takes away songwriter rights to sue for statutory and is unconstitutional. It remains to be seen if that's unconstitutional. That's part of what the lawsuit is about. Did Jeff book this one to discuss the lawsuits? Deborah Newman, I hope I got to it. I did get to the lawsuits at the beginning, but I had to set the foundation and got to it at the end. Okay. Yeah, I like you too, Deborah. Thank you, Luis. And I think I'm done here. Oh my God, Nick asked me to show you a picture of my 107 FHA NOIs for my compositions, Come a Long Way, covered by Consensus, Joe Wood managed reggae artist. So yeah, that's a lot of NOIs, but that's actually a good thing. The question is, are they valid NOIs? They're not NOIs if they weren't sent within 30 days of first distribution, basically when the sound recording went live. So if they were sent after that by Spotify, by HFA, then the possibility is they knew they were sending out invalid NOIs, which means things aren't licensed. Okay, so you know what? There's just too many. I see you, Michelle. Give me a second. There's just too many notes here. So let me go back to the Q&A. Been trying to get from Spotify a more precise, detailed report of the money they owe me, but still no success so far. That's from Never Sleep Boy. I'm sorry to hear that. Remember, I don't know if that's for the sound recording or the musical composition. If it's the musical composition, the regulations of Section 115 apply. They have to account to you in the 20th of the month for the previous month and provide very detailed information. If you get the definitive guide to Spotify royalties, you will see a copy of the statements that they send out with the real numbers, and it explains the whole thing from nuts to bolts, how they calculate it and the sort of information you should be getting. Michelle says, reply me, Jeff, please. What is the best to do to collect mechanical royalties, John Onium and MLC? So Michelle, yes, I mean, I'm sorry, I will toot my own horn. Yes, join Onium. We will work for you. We will find the missing money. We will collect the data. We work for you. We're not paid by the music services. We can work for you in YouTube. We collect in the US and Canada. You just go to the website and sign up. We can start working for you for YouTube right away. And if you want us to work for you for the mechanical royalties, you apply. We have to check your application. You know, we want to make sure, sometimes we get people claiming they wrote songs they didn't write. We sniff it out, make sure it's legit. And then we move forward to the next step and begin working for you. And then it becomes a fight. We got to go dig through the data, find the messes, extract the money, recover the money, and get you paid on the go forward. And we will also register your works with the MLC. Sophia, I hope you got the links. I put them into the general chat, which is a different window than the Q&A. I don't have a way to answer everyone in Q&A at once with the links. Tell you what, I'll also put the links when I'm done into my Twitter feed. I'll just say, here's the link to the definitive guide to Spotify royalties, and here's the link to Untangling the Mess. And I'll tweet those out. May I ask why you no longer like TuneCore CD Baby, as you mentioned in your 52820 video? Yeah, TuneCore just drove off a damn cliff. It used to be when I was there, we were exciting, we were innovating, we were cutting edge. The people that worked there worked on behalf of artists and musicians, and the institutional venture capitalists kind of cleaned house, pushed us all out, and it just became this vapid desert of mediocrity, and they no longer knew what to build. You know, DistroKid is building things left and right. It's so innovative and creative and ahead of the curve. And you know, TuneCore, I can't even name anything it's done in the past 5-10 years. Plus, they're more expensive, and I don't trust them. I just don't trust them. It just seems like it's a company that's being dragged along for an exit, as opposed to a company being built to actually do something for its members. So that's a quick reason why. DistroKid, best in show, least expensive. And I was never a fan of CD Baby. I can't stand the name, sorry, but I'm also not a fan of the back end fee concept where CD Baby makes an unlimited amount of money off of your music every time it sells by taking a percentage of it. I prefer the simple flat up front model, and frankly, DistroKid I think is $20 a year for unlimited distributions. I mean, come on, that's, you know, half the cost of a FedEx, cheaper than guitar strings. Anyway, thank you. If you got an email, because my case is quite complicated, cannot explain. Michelle, just hit up support@audium.com and I can respond to that. Let's see. What about the United Master? So I'm just, what is considered ample proof of intent to discover the songwriter? I think we did that. All right. I think I got it all. Wait, 28 new messages. Dear gosh. Okay. TuneCore pays out more than DistroKid. No, that's just frankly not true. That's just not true. I'm sorry, Yellow Cake Radio. TuneCore does not pay out more than DistroKid. The royalty rates are all basically the same. If you read the definitive guide to Spotify royalties, it explains them. DistroKid takes 0% of the money that comes in, just like TuneCore. They both pass through 100% of what they receive. DistroKid is cheaper, and DistroKid has better feature sets. I just can't recommend them enough. It's sad. I love TuneCore, but I haven't been there since 2012, and it's just like watching a slow motion car crash. Okay. So on that note, oh God, I'm so sorry. If there's more questions, just tweet them to me and I'll do my best to answer them. Thank you for listening to me ramble. What I'm going to do next is I will take this video, I will download it, I'll probably edit the front end, and I'll upload it to my YouTube channel. I'll also, the minute I'm done with this, go to my Twitter account. I will tweet out the links to both the video and the definitive guide to Spotify royalties. Thank you guys also. You're welcome. Just be aware of the Mechanical Licensing Collective's inherent flaws and concerns. If you choose to use them, which you should register. The way you can combat and make sure you get paid is register, get educated, and know how many times your sound recording streamed. So what you're getting paid on your sound recordings, see if the same stream count exists on the compositions, because the two should line up. And the Mechanical Licensing, the MLC, comes into existence in January of 2021. So between now and then, the old rules sort of apply, but I just read online that the Mechanical Licensing Collective is beginning to take data. So try to find that, try to get your data in there. Don't use Harry Fox. I'm sorry. Why use a middleman to enter your own data? And then try to get your shit together in regards to what recordings do exist of your songs, what compositions exist, put it into a spreadsheet, link it all together. It's a pain, but do it, and keep track. When you get those statements back from TuneCore or DistroKid or CD Baby or even Warner Music Group, see the stream counts, see the time frame they happened in, and when you get the payments from the Mechanical Licensing Collective, they gotta match. If they don't, then something's not right. Thank you very much. Stay safe, by the way. This COVID-19 shit is nuts. And be well.